All right, go. Thanks for your patience. We have Giant QB playing on the white side versus Dylan 2009. I threw out a number. The number was 44, and these two guys guessed it. So go at it. Show us some brilliancy. Don't be afraid to show off your skills. So what are we going to have? ChessCube calls it the Vienna Falk beer variation. Petrov 3 knights game, 4 knights game. It keeps getting adjusted. ECO code C46. You can't always go by that. On ChessCube, I don't trust that all the time, but this is true. We do have a 4 knights game, and now white is looking for a new door to deploy this light square bishop. Fianchetto time. And I'm pretty sure you have to chop that pawn up on d5, as otherwise the c3 knight is going to run the risk of getting kicked around. And I don't know that he could really run away to a great square. Sometimes if this pawn was still on its home square, the knight could play to e2 and then reposition by jumping to g3. Not the case here. And one of the questions I have is whether or not e4 is available. e4 could be met with queen e2, and in fact that is a bit uncomfortable, because if black has to play queen e7, that's inconveniencing the dark square bishop. So it's, I think, a different story if the bishop is out now. Now this is an issue. I think e4, and if queen here, queen e7, not an inconvenience in that case. But now castled e4 is, I don't think, there because of the pin. But once black gets more development in, and that's exactly what we see, now e5, this knight, a bit unstable. This pawn on c3 controls this knight. d4, there's not enough support for it, so I think d3 was needed. So now, what will the story be? If e4, knight here, a bloodbath on d4, and after the queen recaptures, there's not time to recapture on e4. There is not time to recapture. So I think e4 is strong. c3 I think should have been played. Get the bishop out along this diagonal, and maybe this rook would want to play on the b file and aim at b7, but I don't know how influential that would really be, because the bishop could always be dropping back. Black stands better here. Without a doubt, there is not a good home for the f3 knight. Maybe best is to actually give up a pawn. Maybe throw it to d4, know that you're going to lose a pawn, and then play that position out. But this guy sinking this pawn in white's territory, and now this knight running in reverse, he's boxed out. This pawn needs to be challenged. It's hit once. My first thought is just to develop and defend. Bishop to f5, queen to d7, rook a to d8, rook f to e8. Get all pieces working. Black is looking very good. Bishop f5, I guess. Hang on now. Bishop f5, maybe d4. If this pawn captures, it could be recapturing with the knight, being on the bishop. If you get this bishop working somehow, you definitely have to break at this pawn. That's a must. With this pawn here, this knight is dead. Can't have that. You need to break at this pawn. So, what am I doing? I'm identifying where my opponent is strong. Black is strong in that of having this pawn right here. I think challenging it, or okay, d4, maybe. But this pawn, I think, stands strong. I think don't take en passant. Keep this guy as is. Retreat the bishop. These pawns still can't move, or can they? Okay, you could press up here, but then the knight jumps into this square, and all of a sudden these light squares are... they really have a lot of my attention. f3 in particular. Time situation, okay, 3:13 for white, 2:27 for black. Bishop here, I wouldn't even be considering it. You're kicking a piece to a square where it would want to go to. Let's rule that out. Maybe f3 now. I think f3 is maybe the way to go. However, is this going to be the reply? You still have to challenge this. Number one priority, get this knight working. If you can't get this knight working, there's a problem. And the only way to get him working is to eliminate this pawn. You need to free up the d3 or f3 squares. So f6 is the next way to go. I don't think that you could just attack this pawn with pieces. Queen here, rook here, or queen e7. Okay, queen out attacks the bishop, but what do you do after to the bishop backing up? In fact, now when the bishop backs up, the f pawn is freed. So if we're seeing f3, f5 I think is a strong reply. There's very good coordination on the black side. Everything is defended except b7, but that's not accessible. Everything is defended. This bishop is unprotected. There's a disconnect between the white rooks. These are all cues. These are all ways to assess this position, to know who stands better. Seeing a disconnect between the rooks, this pawn boxing out the knight, and really a lead in development as well, right? If the knight can't move, there's no way that white could be fully developed. Strong move. 2-minute warning for white, 2:12 for black. The queen, where would she like to go for black? Okay, so white is vacating g2 for the knight. Maybe not a bad idea. Knight g2 to f4, eliminating the light square bishop. This structure right here cancels out the bishop, and in some sense it restricts this knight on c6. So, okay, maybe is there really a way to work around this pawn? White is trying to do just that. Bishop drops back, knight g2 is the way to get it in play. I think this was still available to maybe strike at it, but maybe e3 as a follow-up might have been strong. Maybe the idea here is to blockade in some sense, get the knight on e3 and then look to this. Knight right here. Okay, bishop back, h4. You got to maintain this knight's position, but now with this bishop stuck in the corner and biting on a rock, c4 springs to mind. Knight a5 to c4 ideas, and then this bishop starts to become an issue. This light square bishop is sectioned off to the king side of the board, which means the light squares on the queen side are probably weak, and it's all the more highlighted because of this structural defect, the c4 pawn or the c4 square being a hole. It'd be nice if there was support with the pawn, but the bishop and knight are converging quite well, and already a skewer is threatened. Oh, okay, the offer of a queen exchange. And this seems like it'll fail somehow. c6, queen here. She's running short on squares. c6 if she drops back, bishop here. So after c6, queen b5 is an only move. Taking the queen, you recapture with the pawn, and then you get some play for the rook. But okay, queen here is the only way to prevent the loss of material. I'm pretty sure, yeah. Can't go to b3, the knight's on it. So queen to b4. Just being held. Oh, okay, so here we go. We're going to have this exchange. Where does the queen go? If she goes here, the follow-up after the bishop takes the rook, there's going to be a follow-up of knight here, picking up the dark square bishop, but maybe that's not a bad idea. Or maybe that's not a good idea to take this bishop who really isn't doing a whole lot. Staring at a pawn. 45 seconds for white. You just got to move. Active square. Okay, h5, 41 seconds, less than a minute for black. Bishop takes rook. Rook takes. Rook takes, get the rook doing something else. This bishop now needs to get working. The queen has pressure on the pawn, so it's restricting the black queen. There was too much time spent right there on that recapture, so maybe just drop the bishop back, control the knight, 2 squares opposite the knight. It's controlling it. Bishop g2 to h3, put pressure on this pawn, maybe. This knight doesn't really have any great jumping points. This is a weak link, so black could look to target it. c3, hard move to argue with, centralizing the rooks. All pieces are now working for black. 26 seconds to 33 seconds. Okay, what's this knight looking to do? Mate threat? Oh, knight right here was threatened. Sniffed right out, though, with queen to e7. Keeping the queens on the board, it's much more complicated. g5, oh, the knight's dead. Ouch. Ouch, ouch, ouch. There is no tricky pin. Is there? Bishop a3. 14 seconds to 23 seconds. Avoid the queen exchange. Keep things complicated. Queen here or knight here. This light square bishop isn't working. f3. The bishop's working. 6 seconds. Gotta get this pawn working. Pawn push is brutal. Oh! Just like that, the queen's dead. And now everything crumbles. Mate in 2. Rook here with mate to follow on g2 or g1. Down to the wire. Resignation. Good game, guys, between Giant QB and Dylan 2009. Alrighty.